Thank you, Imam Jaban. Thank you, Reverend Karen Taliasan, and thank you, Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul. Now, we will move into our first speaker. So let me introduce our first speaker. His name is Professor Jasser Auda. He holds a PhD in philosophy of Islamic law from University of Wales in the UK, and a PhD in systems analysis from University of Waterloo in Canada. Earlier in his life, he memorized the Quran and studied the fiqh, which is the jurisprudence, usul and hadith, the sayings and traditions of Prophet Muhammad, in the Al-Azhar Mosque in Cairo, Egypt. He is a professor of Islamic law at Carleton University in Canada and many renowned universities around the Middle East. He is a founder and a board member of the International Union of Muslim Scholars, member of the European Council of Fatwa and Research. He has written 25 books in Arabic and English, and some of which have been translated into 25 languages. So mashallah, he's got a very good credentials and qualifications. I only gave you a brief synopsis, so please help me welcome Professor Jasser Auda.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good evening, everybody. This is very interesting. I thought that this talk is part of the training that we are offering this weekend for the leaders of the community and the leaders of the student organizations and so on. And I can see already that this is a very different audience from the audience we planned to address. And it's a fantastic sign that people have a sense, especially the kind of audience I'm seeing from the community, the wider community I'm saying, has a sense of the situation. And therefore, well, what I am supposed to address, the side I'm supposed to address, is the side of the Islamic theology, how to deal with fear, the title that they gave to my lecture. And I humbly disagree with this title, fear and stuff. It's in the Islamic theology, you only fear God. You're not supposed to fear anybody else or anything else. And in fact, this is the definition of freedom in the Islamic theology, when you are free from fear except for God. And therefore, the issue of fear is not really an Islamic issue. The true Muslim is supposed to fear God in the time of fearing people. And when you fear God, then you don't fear people anymore, because God will take care of the affairs. I'm not sure if quoting the Quran in the context I will quote is the right thing to do in the time allowed, but I think that this is the Quranic, the Islamic theological approach to what is happening. And forgive me for quoting the stories of the Pharaoh and Haman and Qarun and all of that you might not think is relevant to what we are talking about, but I come from the land of the pharaohs, as the brother said. I'm Canadian now for a long time. I live in Canada, and I live in the Canadian capital now. But growing up in a land that had known tyranny for a long time, not just for the past 50 or 60 years since the junta, the generals made a state and called it the Republic of Egypt. It's actually the last 10,000 years where you have a tyrannical government that is mostly running that country. So I come from a civilization that is quite familiar with tyranny and what tyranny does and how it works and where it can take people. And the Quran is talking about the tyranny of the Pharaoh in about 1/3 of its verses. thousands of verses. 1/3 of the whole book of Islam is talking about the story of the children of Israel and Moses and the Pharaoh and all the dynamics that happened. And if you put all of the themes that had to deal with the children of Israel and the Pharaoh together and try to take a careful look, you will see that tyranny starts with dividing people. إن فرعون علا في الأرض وجعل أهلها شيعا. I'll say the verses in Arabic and translate. إن فرعون علا في الأرض وجعل أهلها شيعا يستضعف طائفة منهم. Pharaoh, God says, started by exalting himself in the land by dividing the people and making a section of them weak. يستضعف طائفة منهم يذبح أبناءهم ويستحيي نساءهم. When he made a section of them weak, he was able to kill their children and shame their women. إنه كان من المفسدين. That is how he became corrupt. So the Pharaoh started with a very divisive talk in which he made a small group of people vulnerable, and then he started to attack them so that he exalts himself in the land. Because he appealed to the worst side, to the evil side of the wider population of his time by being a tyrant, not on everybody, but on the children of Israel at that time, the oppressed, the different of the time. And then Pharaoh did not operate on his own. Pharaoh operated in a triangle of tyranny. If he was the side of the political tyranny, there was another side that the Quran talked about in detail, which had to do with economic tyranny. There was another personality by the name Qarun, in Arabic Korah, in the biblical stories, in which Korah was the billionaire of the time. Korah was the economic side of the pharaonic tyranny, in which he accumulated wealth enough for, the Quran says, the keys of the treasures were too difficult for 10 men to carry. So he was one of the children of Israel. He betrayed his lineage and he claimed not to be from the children of Israel anymore. He claimed to be pharaonic somehow. And he accumulated wealth to the extent that I'm summarizing a number of verses here in different chapters where he would go out in his ornament and his golden chariots and all of that and so forth. In fact, the Quran, when he talked about the trio of the Korah and the Pharaoh and Haman, which I will speak about now, he mentioned Korah first. وقارون وفرعون وهامان ولقد جاءتهم رسلهم بالبينات فاستكبروا في الأرض وما كانوا سابقين. The Quran says it started with Korah and then the Pharaoh and then Haman. And they were the ones who exalted themselves in the land and yet could not escape our punishment. Who is Haman? Haman is the third one in the trio of tyranny, who was the highest priest of the time. Yes, we don't worship the sun and the moon anymore like the pharaohs. We don't worship the cats and the cows anymore and so forth like the pharaohs. But we worship God. But still, there are Hamans of the time. Where I come from and everywhere, the side of what you could call a religious tyranny that has an alliance with the political tyranny and the economic tyranny in order to create a tyrannical system. The tyrannical system that is able to give a certain number of people reign over the land and continue to have the reign over the land. History tells us that Pharaoh ruled Egypt of the time for 65 years, like that, just killing the children, doing whatever, all the way until he drowned in the sea. Haman, the high priest, what he did was corrupting the religion. The religion, the Quran says, of the pharaohs or before the pharaohs were the oneness of God since the prophet Joseph, Prophet Yusuf. In fact, one of the ministers of the pharaoh followed Moses, and he told his people, why did you disbelieve after you had believed in Joseph? And he brought you all the true religion. The Hamans of the time corrupted the religion that Joseph had brought to Egypt and eventually made people worship the Pharaoh himself and making the Pharaoh himself a god so that people worship him. And therefore, by corrupting the religion, they were able to subdue the people by mixing the Pharaoh with God and mixing the character of the Pharaoh with the characteristics of God. And that is what happens in the tyrannical part of the world. Perhaps you don't have this here yet, but coming from the Middle East, that's what the priests of the time do, by making people worship the pharaohs of the time, not necessarily in Egypt, but not only in Egypt, in different countries too, where they corrupt the religion in order to mix the character of the king with the character of God, so that people worship the king, and that the king continues to reign over the politics. The Qarun or the Korah has a very important role in this, because the economic tyranny, which the Quran described as the wealth circulating only amongst the rich. كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ. Economic tyranny happens when the wealth circulates only amongst the rich. This is the Quranic definition. And at that time of ancient Egypt, this is what happened. The wealth was circulating between Korah and Pharaoh and Haman and their soldiers and their systems and everything that they had, and people were hungry. And whenever people want to say something or rebel, they take more taxes from them, and they make them more hungry. And they didn't mind. They continued. And when Moses came, the Quran says, people came to watch what is going to happen. And we all know the story, whether from the Bible or from the Quran, of the snakes and the miracles that happened with Moses. But even after the miracles happened, people didn't follow Moses, because the tyrant of the time, Pharaoh, said, well, anybody who follows him is going to have his arms and legs cut, and is going to be hanged, crucified on the palm trees, etc., etc. And therefore, he was able to scare the people away from supporting Moses. And the poor magicians who believed in Moses, they were the magicians of the Pharaoh, but then they decided to believe in Moses because they realized that what Moses is bringing is not the usual magic, is not the everyday magic where you play tricks on people's eyes and so on. This is real. When his staff was like seriously eating the other sticks and all of that, they realized that no, this is not magic. And therefore they believe. Pharaoh killed them, and life went on. And if you read in the history of Moses, you will see that people, after all that happened, went home and as if nothing happened. This is exactly how tyranny works. Works by an economic side that deprives the masses under the top, who are circulating the wealth amongst themselves, and by using religion in a way that serves the tyrannical agenda of the politicians, but not really being faithful to the religion, and by exalting the tyrant by dividing the people. And that system of tyranny cannot work without a group of people that the Quran called al-hashirin, or the callers. The Quran has extensive talk about Yes, about to finish, about the collars, and this is the last pillar of a system of tyranny, in which the Quran says that the Pharaoh used to send the callers to the corners of the land. And these callers used to tell the people that the children of Israel are the wicked ones, the children of Israel are trying to drive you out of your homes. Even though at that time the children of Israel were, very weak and meek, and they didn't have any interest to drive anybody out of their homes. And they were enjoying, some place like this where they're playing and having coffee and oblivious about the world. But the callers made the children of Israel the face of evil. And the message, the Quran details it in some of the chapters in an amazing way. They go out and tell people, we are all scared, and the Pharaoh is concerned, and we are thinking of leaving this place because the children of Israel are causing so much havoc. And the Pharaoh said, Moses and the children of Israel are trying to get you out of your land and drive you out of your land and take your land and occupy it after you go. So what do you want me to do? And of course his ministers, when he told them, what do you want me to do? This guy is going to take your land. They told him, kill them. So they went on, and the rest of the story is history. When they tried to kill the children of Israel, and the miracle happened of the sea and the drowning of the Pharaoh and all of that. Today, and I have 2 minutes, we don't expect a miracle of a sea killing the evil ones. We expect to work and to unite and to be aware of the dangers of tyranny in politics. It's very easy for politics to deviate to tyranny. And people from this part of the world know that very well from the history of this part of the world, where it's very easy to deviate into violence and to tyranny and all of that, unless people of principle stand together. People of principle unite against the forces of tyranny, and unite not just by talk, unite seriously and deal with whatever that comes as much as whatever comes in a serious and real way. Otherwise, the talk is not going to get tyranny go away. It's very important to strategize. And I thought that what I'm doing tonight and tomorrow is a simple advice for my brothers and sisters here. And if there is a video, that would be great, for Muslims in America and all decent people, not just Muslims, but perhaps Muslims are the children of Israel of the time, as far as I can see. But for them to really strategize and think how, through legal means, how can we face what's happening, and how can we deal with the situation that is unfolding, and take it from somebody who came from the land of the pharaohs. This is tyranny in the making, and it's not funny, even though, as I mentioned in the beginning, a believer doesn't fear anybody but God, and a believer should unite with other believers in the face of evil. I hope that this was not too pessimistic, as my brothers warned me to be, and thank you very much.